Juniper by Monica Furlong, Chapter 13. Do you want to be a Doran? I remembered Truan asking me one day as we sat high on the branch of a tree. I want to understand all kinds of things, I said. Maybe more than some people do. Or maybe they do it differently. And I don't want to be pushed into getting married just for the sake of it. I'm a bit scared about being a Doran, Truan admitted. Anghard can do real magic, you know, though she doesn't bother very often. Yes, I think Uni can too, I said. I suppose that means that eventually we will do magic. I used to think when I was little that it would be lovely to do magic. Imagine being able to fly, or get the house to clean itself up all on its own, or to have something good to eat whenever you felt like it, or to get to a place quickly without having to walk all the way, I said. Now I'm not so sure, said Truan. Exciting in a way, but maybe something I'd rather not meddle with. I like to feel that you can depend on things being predictable. Apples falling downward, a bowl of porridge being empty when it is empty, people being there or not being there. Truan was silent for a while. Then she began to tell me of an extraordinary experience. I went to Caerleon on an errand for Angharad one morning, she began, and on the road I met a terrifying dog. It was very big, the biggest dog I had ever seen. Black with great teeth, a slavering tongue, and a strange smell. It would not let me move. Every time I took a step forward, it growled and looked as if it would attack me. But when I started walking slowly backward the way I had come, the same thing happened. I stood there until noon, too frightened to move. Then it was as if I talked to Angharad inside myself, asking her what I should do. Suddenly, there she was, right beside me on the road, though she did not look at me or talk to me. She spoke to the dog in a language I did not understand. Then she took me by the hand and led me right past it. I turned around to see what the dog was doing, but it had disappeared. When I turned back, Angharad had disappeared too. When I got home, I asked her about it, of course. I half hoped she would deny it, say it had all been my imagination. But she simply nodded her head and said, "You needed help." Then, and this was the worst bit, she added, "That was no ordinary dog." It was bigger than any dog I ever saw, I agreed. I mean, it wasn't a dog at all, Angharad said. I have a great enemy in Caerleon. I supposed he was away and that it was safe to send you. But I was mistaken. He had returned and he recognized you as being my apprentice. How could he recognize me? I asked. He had never seen me. Sorcerers recognize anything or anyone that belongs to a Doran, their clothes, their animals, or their apprentices. How? I asked, and I could not believe Angharad's answer. By their smell, she said. I was struck by this story of Truan's. I was also trying to see if I could smell Truan, or remember whether any special smell came from Angharad. Yes, I thought, she smelled of roses. Uni's house certainly had a distinctive smell, damp and musty, and her person also had a smell, of garlic, spice, and unwashed skin. But I didn't smell like that, or at least I hoped I didn't. Somehow, Truan finished, that whole episode scared me. Up till then I thought magic was exciting, But then I knew that there was real danger. What danger? That sorcerers could kill you or enslave you. They can take the spirit out of you, you know. They call it ghosting. And you wander around not knowing who you are. Sometimes now I just want to go back home and lead an ordinary life and not get mixed up in magic. Finally, hesitantly, I told Truan about the time I had done some magic myself, how I had healed Gamal. And yet, when I later had tried to cure my own chilblains, it had not worked. "Do you think it just works when you do it for other people?" asked Truan. "I mean, I've never seen Angharad use magic to make her own life easier, to save bothering to grind any more meal, say, or to avoid the labor of threading up a loom." Perhaps the talk of magic influenced me in some way. A few days before, Angharad had been showing me how to weave, and that afternoon, standing alone at the big loom while the other two were out somewhere, I had the strangest feeling that the feathery white figures I was weaving into the midnight blue background were three-dimensional, that they were just as solidly part of the world as the stool or the loom itself. Later, when I took up the spindle, I felt as if the thread was flowing not just from the puff of wool hanging over my left shoulder, but through my arm and indeed through my whole body. For the first time the thread was perfectly even. It looked like the thread that Angharad spun, and what was more, I knew that I was spinning, somewhat as Angharad did, in an effortless rhythm. When Angharad came back, she looked at the weaving I had done and at the thread I had spun. "So," she said, "you are ready." "Ready for what?" I asked. "You must work hard at your cloak. Uni will be back soon." And so often, that day when it all seemed so easy, was followed by one in which it all seemed impossibly difficult. I realized that I had made a slight mistake in following the pattern of my weaving, but it was a long way back and I simply couldn't be bothered to undo it. In any case, the error was so tiny that it scarcely showed at all. "What did Angharad mean, ready?" I asked Truan in our white and timber sleeping chamber. "Ready for what?" Truan's lovely face looked troubled. "I don't know," she said. "Some sort of ceremony, maybe. Or an ordeal. Dorans are said to train their apprentices with ordeals." "What do you mean?" I asked, uneasy now myself. "They want to find out if you are strong enough, brave enough," she said. "But Angharad and Uni wouldn't do anything really cruel to us, would they?" I asked. "They might if they thought it would be good for us," Truan replied gloomily. I often thought about this conversation in the days that followed, as I finished the rich material of my cloak. Yet I would look across the room at Angharad's kind motherly face, and I could not believe that she wished me any ill. And even Uni, hard as life with her had been, had never set out to hurt or frighten me. She was just not very good at imagining what I was feeling. I felt that I trusted both Dorans. Truan, however, felt far less confident than I did. She was plainly frightened of the coming ordeal, whatever it was, and she began to sleep badly. Occasionally she would wake me up with her tossing and turning. Twice she had bad dreams and began to shout out in her sleep. In the morning she was pale and heavy-eyed. I saw Angharad look thoughtfully at her, and I wondered if she would give her a word of comfort, but she did not. Angharad spoke only once about what was to come, on the day that we cut the heavy material from the loom. Joyful that my long task was done, I picked up the material and draped it for a moment around my shoulders. It was very heavy. Angharad glanced at me, then lowered her eyes as if she had seen more than she wanted to see. "Take it off," she said quite sharply. "It is not time." "When will it be time?" I inquired. "There will be a ceremony," she said, "for you and Truin, when Uni returns." "What will it be like?" "I cannot tell you." "Truin is very scared about it," I said disloyally, wanting a little comfort myself. "I know," Angharad said, and turned to poke the fire. I was not reassured. There was still a lot of work to be done on the cloak. From the wooden chest, Angharad produced a bolt of dusky orange silk for the lining. She also gave me 2 topaz stones set in silver with which to make a clasp. And finally I had to embroider a collar for it. I spent several days drawing patterns on a piece of slate. Until one pattern, a design that grew unexpectedly from the look of Moon's claws, seemed exactly right to me. Angharad gave me some seed pearls to sew into the pattern, and they represented claws very convincingly. "This will be the most precious thing you will ever own," she said, "and you will keep it all your life." On the day that I sewed the last stitch of my cloak, and Angharad folded it safely away for me in the big chest, Uni came back. It was a raw March day with a bitter east wind cutting across the moor, and Truin and I were glad to come home from our walk, back to the fire and a hot drink. And there was Uni, sitting on the hearth as if she had never been away.